Yeah, so here we go. Be'ezras Hashem, today's daf is daf Ayin Vav. So I'm just going to go back to the Mishnah on daf Ayin Hey Amud Aleph. So you get what we're talking about. We left off in Ayin Hey Amud Beis. The Mishnah on the bottom discusses like this. Let us say a man made a condition that he only wants to get engaged with this late girl on condition that she has no handicap. For example, she's not missing a finger. Okay, she's not missing a finger. Okay, they get engaged, and he discovers the Hoya Balmuman that she discovers before they get married, while she's waiting from the engagement to the marriage. While she's still in her father's house, he discovers to his shock that she's missing a finger. So now he wants to say, "Oh, you fooled me. That there is no marriage. There's engagement is off because I wanted to marry a girl that had a complete hand." And father says, "No. If you want to get rid of her, you have to give her a get and a ksuba because she didn't fool you. She's missing a finger. Yes, she's missing a finger, but she lost her finger after you got engaged. And it's too bad. Your field got flooded, and it's your tough luck. You engaged a perfect girl. After you got engaged, she lost the finger. So who has to bring the proof of when this accident happened? Who does the husband have to bring a proof, or does the father have to bring the proof? So the Mishnah says the father has to bring the proof. And that makes perfect sense. Why? Because what is the father trying to say? That the husband owes ksuba money. If he wants to undo the marriage, the engagement, he has to give a get and pay ksuba. So if he's trying to extract money from the husband, he has to prove. That's Moitzi Mechavera Olavaraya. But that's not the end of the story, because really the father has what's called a cheskas mammon, very important. That means people are generally born healthy. And therefore, if we were assuming that she lost a finger, we always assume she was healthy till the last moment, and that at a later time she lost her finger. And she must have lost her finger after she got engaged. That's called a cheskas aguf. There's an assumption that most bodies are healthy, you're born healthy, and she lost her finger after she got engaged. Nevertheless, so now you have here one part of the Mishnah, one part versus another part. You have a cheskas haguf, that perhaps that the most likely the cheskas guf tells you that she lost a finger after she got engaged, and then you have a cheskas mammon, which tells you that if you want to take money out of the husband, you have to prove it. So it's cheskas guf versus cheskas hamammon. So the beginning of the Mishnah says the cheskas hamammon is stronger, and therefore who's trying to extract the money? The father is trying to extract money from this husband, and for him to pay ksuba for his daughter, and therefore the cheskas mammon is stronger. That's the problem. The problem is, if you read the end of the Mishnah, it seems to contradict itself. The end of the Mishnah says, if they got married already, and after they married, the day after he married, during Sheva Brachas, he noticed he's missing a finger. So then it's too late. Then it's up to, if the husband wants to get rid of her, he has to prove that she had this, she was missing a finger prior to the engagement. And if he doesn't, then he has to pay ksuba money. So what do you see from there? When the end of the Mishnah says that the husband has to bring the proof, because we say that she has a cheskas haguf, which means she most likely was a healthy person when she got engaged. And he has a cheskas mammon, right? That, you're trying to extract money from him. Then the cheskas haguf overpowers the cheskas hamammon. So you have a contradiction from the beginning of the Mishnah to the end of the Mishnah. When it's a cheskas mammon, all you have to remember this. If it's a cheskas guf versus a cheskas mammon, the beginning of the Mishnah says cheskas mammon trumps. That the if you're trying to extract money, that's the stronger chazaka. And then the Mishnah says the opposite. If at the end of the Mishnah it says if cheskas guf versus cheskas mammon, the cheskas haguf wins, and therefore she wins unless the husband proves otherwise. He has to pay ksuba. So how do you resolve the beginning of the Mishnah to the end of the Mishnah? So we go to Amud Beis. So the Gemara said, Amar Rab Laza. Rab Laza said that Misha shanazu lo shanazu. In other words, there are two authors of the Mishnah. The beginning of the Mishnah that says cheskas mammon is stronger goes according to Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua always in the beginning of the Masechta says that if you have a cheskas aguf versus a cheskas mammon, the cheskas mammon is stronger. And the end of the Mishnah goes according to Rabbi Gamliel. Rabbi Gamliel holds that cheskas aguf is stronger versus cheskas mammon. And that's an odd way to learn a Mishnah, that misha shanazu loy shanazu. The first part of the Mishnah is not the same author as the second part of the Mishnah. Now, this is where we're up to. We're up to Ayin Hey Amud Beis, about like 10 lines from the top. Amar Rava. This is a side point that the Gemara we didn't mention yesterday. Just a side point to understand Rabbi Yeshua. Again, Rabbi Yeshua holds that if you have a cheskas haguf versus a cheskas mammon, you go after the cheskas. You go after the cheskas mammon. Amar Rava. Rava said a side point. Loi tema. Don't say in the opinion of Rabbi Yeshua. Loi also basa chazaka du gufa klal. Rabbi Yeshua totally ignores cheskas haguf. That's not true. He doesn't totally ignore cheskas guf. The cheskas guf means something. Ella, but rather you have to understand Rabbi Yeshua. Ki loi also Rabbi Yeshua basa chazaka du gufa. When does Rabbi Yeshua does not value a cheskas haguf? When you have a cheskas mammon versus a cheskas haguf, you give credence more to the cheskas mammon over the cheskas haguf. If you have no chazaka of a mammon, you just have a chazaka of guf. Also, Rabbi Yeshua, chazaka de gufa. Rabbi Yeshua would agree that chazaka of guf means something. How do you see that? The Tanya we learned in a brisa. Bryce is like this. Suppose a guy was tamei. All of a sudden, he was tamei, so he had a din tuma on him. And the Tanakama holds like this. Then he has a nega. Now, in order for a nega, a leprosy, to be a real leprosy that you're tamei, it has to be totally white, and you have to have two black hairs, then grow out, two white hairs grow out of it. But if you have first two white hairs, and then you have the leprosy form, that's not a tuma. So let's say, so the Bryce is like this. In Baharis, if the white blotch formed, koydem l'se'ar lavan, before you had two white hairs, tummy, then the man is tummy. In se'ar lavan koydem l'baharis, if the white hairs were there, let's say you have white hairs, and then the blotch formed, tahar, it's tahar. Suffix, if you don't know if the blotch formed before the white hairs, or if the white hairs were there before the blotch, then you're tummy, because you're already tamei from a different nega, so we say you're a cheskas tamei. Rabbi Yeshua oimek keha. Rabbi Yeshua uses this word keha. We don't consider it a nega. My keha, amaraba keha means tahar. You are pure. And so why did Rabbi Yeshua say you're pure? Because in that spot where this suffix nega grew, that spot you have a cheskas haguf that you were tahar. You wouldn't have a tummy in that spot where this suffix nega happened. So Rabbi Yeshua gives credence to a cheskas aguf. So you see that Rabbi Yeshua doesn't totally ignore a cheskas aguf. When does Rabbi Yeshua ignore cheskas haguf? Only if it comes up against cheskas mammon. But if it's at alone, you would give credence to a cheskas aguf. Rava Amar. Rava gives the new teretz to the Gemara's question. How do you reconcile the Mishnah? So the Gemara says the whole Mishnah, according to Rava goes according to Rabbi Gamliel, that you give credence to cheskas haguf. If that's the case, if you give credence to cheskas haguf, then why don't you say cheskas haguf tell you in the beginning of the Mishnah that it's up to the husband, because the husband should bring the proof, because the husband, the cheskas haguf should say that the husband has to pay the ksuba, that the lost finger happened after the engagement. That's what cheskas haguf translates. So why is it that if it's discovered in the house, if you've discovered the handicap in the house of the father has to prove it? So the Rabbi says, Reisha, the beginning of the Mishnah, is kan nimsu v'kan havya. That means that since it was found, it was discovered in the father's house, probably the father did what he can to cover up that his daughter has a blemish. Therefore, there's no real cheskas haguf here so much. It's a weakened cheskas haguf. Therefore, what you have here is then you only have a cheskas mammon. And if the father wants to extract money from this husband, then he has to prove that this handicap happened after the engagement, because kan nimsu, if you find it here, it must have been that the father, was blocking it, and it was there even prior to the engagement. Sefer, but the end of the Mishnah, when it was discovered after she got married, right? After she got married, so then we say it happened much later, because then kan nimsu kan hoya, it must happen after the marriage, after he got married, or much later after the engagement. That's when this handicap happened, and therefore it's too bad on the Baal. He married a perfect girl, but this accident happened much later. That's why the Sefer of the Mishnah says it's up to the husband. If he doesn't want to pay ksuba, then he has to prove that it happened prior to his engagement. Eisvei Abaya. So Abaya asked the question. The Abaya asked the question on this explanation of Rava. The Mishnah says, Nichnesol Rishus Abal. After they get married, right? They got married. So therefore, the husband discovers that she's missing a finger. So the Mishnah says, Habal tzarech lahavi raya. The husband has to prove that sha'at shaloitis aris hoya bar mumen elu. That he has to prove that these blemishes happened when? Prior to him engaging her. Prior to him the engagement. Okay? So he has to take it 2 steps back. He has to say that this handicap was there not when they were engaged, but even prior to the engagement. And the whole engagement was done by mistake, and therefore no get and no ksuba. So the Gemara Rabbi says, if it's enough, that why does he have to prove that somebody saw her handicap prior to the engagement? Why isn't it enough to prove that she had the handicap during the engagement? And you always tell me that when it's during the engagement, it's now, once she had the handicap during the engagement in her father's house, it's up to the father to prove it. So that's the question of Abaya. He can only, the husband gets exempt from paying ksuba if he proves that she had the handicap prior to the engagement. But even if she proved that she had the handicap after the engagement, that's not enough. He would still have to pay ksuba. Va'amai, why isn't that not enough? Lema, let him say, I proved to you that she had this handicap while we were engaged. I couldn't find anybody who said she had it beforehand. But once I proved to you that she had it by the engagement, now it's up to the father to prove otherwise, that she didn't have this handicap prior. We always say that once you proved that she had the handicap in her father's house, then she must have had the handicap all her life, even prior to the engagement. That's what Rava said. Amalei, so Rava answered back, because Mishnus Arsa, if after engaged, right, Mishum de Ikalamemi, there's another chazaka that helps the father. What's the other chazaka that helps the father? Chazaka, we have an assumption, ain't adam shaysu b'kois elam kain boitkai. A person would not get engaged to a girl unless he checked it. The high raw, and he must have seen that she had this missing finger. Then he pious, and he came to terms with that. So that helps the father. So therefore, that's why the husband really has to prove it so well that she had this handicap prior to the engagement. So the Gemara says, if you have that svara, you have that logic, nobody marries a girl unless he checks her. Actually, to aris nami, even if he proves that she had the handicap prior to the engagement, that's not enough, because perhaps he came to terms with that and it was Michael that she had it, because he must have known about it. Ella, the reason is we don't accept that. Chazaka, we have another rule. Ein adam pious b'mumen. A person, it's very hard to come to terms if the girl has a handicap. So therefore, that's why when he proves that she had this handicap prior to the engagement, he's off the hook. He doesn't have to pay ksuba. So hachinami, let's say the same thing. Even if he proves that she had the handicap during the engagement in her father's house, chazaka ain't adam pious b'mumen. He would never come to terms with her having a handicap. And the fact is, once he proved that she had the handicap during the engagement, Rava said a svara that kan nimsu kan hoya, that you always assume that she had the handicap prior to the engagement. So the Gemara says like this, no. So Rava will tell you like this, Ella mishnus arsa, once you get engaged, mishum de ikatarte, there are two things that help the father, And that's why the onus is on the husband to prove otherwise. There are two things in his favor. Chazaka Hamid Haguf al Cheskasa. You put the body on its assumption, and most bodies are born healthy, and any handicap must have occurred much later in life. The Chazaka, and you have another strength that helps the father. A person would not marry a girl with a handicap unless he checked her out, and therefore he must have seen this and he came to terms with it. So two things help the father, and really it's the onus is on the husband. There is something on the husband's side that should put the onus on the father. My Amrit, why? What would you say? Chazaka ain't odem epais b'mammon. Most people never come to terms with a handicap. So you have one. So the Gemara says have. Therefore, we go to Amin Vavim at Aleph. Have chada bin koim tarte. You have one chazaka in favor of the husband. You have two chazakas in favor of the father. So therefore, since we're from the get-go, we are favoring the father. Who has to do the proving in court? The husband. One in place of two, that doesn't hold up a candle to that. So therefore, it's on the onus is on the husband. So now once you know the onus is on the husband, so now you have like this. He's married. If he could prove ad shaloi te'aris, that the handicap was prior to the engagement, Hamid Haguf al Cheskas lo yikamemer. Then there's no Cheskas Haguf anymore, and all you have is a Cheskas Mamin, and that he would never come to terms with marrying a handicapped woman. So he proved it. So he keeps his money and doesn't have to pay ksuba. My ika. What else are you going to say? Chazaka ein odem shaisa because elam came boitkai. That he must have known about it, and therefore he did come to terms. And he must have come to terms. That's what you could say on the other side. And he should pay ksuba. Adarabba, you say the other way. Chazaka ein odem epais mumum. Most people will not become to terms with a handicap. And he keeps his money where it belongs. So that's the way Rava learned the Gemara. The Rava learned that the whole Mishnah goes according to Rabbi Gamliel, and he reconciled, he squared off the Reisha could also go according to Rabbi Gamliel. Normally, Rabbi Gamliel gives credence to Cheskas Haguf, but in that case, the Cheskas Haguf doesn't work in the beginning of the Mishnah, because since it was discovered already in the father's house, probably the father was kan nimtzu kan hoya. He was always, covering up that his girl has a missing finger, and therefore there's no Cheskas Haguf anymore. And therefore, if the father wants to extract money from the husband, he has to prove it. Ravashi says another difference. Again, the Mishnah goes according to Rabbi Gamliel. We paskin like Rabbi Gamliel. Rabbi Gamliel says when you have a Cheskas Haguf versus a Cheskas Mammon, you always give credence to the Cheskas Haguf. But why don't we give credence to the Cheskas Haguf in the beginning of the Mishnah? And then we say, no, the father has to prove it. Because Reisha, in the beginning of the Mishnah, Mana la'aba biyadcha. Who is trying to collect and extract money from the husband? It's actually the father. And really, whose Cheskas Haguf is it? It's the girl's Cheskas Haguf. So we're using the girl's Cheskas Haguf to help the father extract money from the husband. So then we don't say that. And therefore, it's up to the father, in the beginning of the Mishnah, the onus is on the father to prove when she had this handicap, that the handicap happened after the engagement. But the Seifa, after she got married, the end of the Mishnah discusses she got married. Ksuba, when a girl is married, is paid directly to the girl. So she's using her own Cheskas Haguf to overpower the Cheskas Mammon of the husband. It's her own Cheskas Haguf to extract money. So it's money, the money that's owed to me is biyach in your hand. And I'm using my Cheskas Haguf. The girl's using her own Cheskas Haguf to take out money from the husband. And therefore, in that case, Cheskas Haguf would overpower the Cheskas Mammon. And by saying Cheskas Haguf overpowers the Cheskas Mammon, we say that her handicap must have happened much later in life and after she got engaged. And therefore, if the husband does not want to pay ksuba, he has to prove otherwise. One more question on this, and then we move on to a similar topic. Esvei Rav Acha Bereid Rav Avia Rav Ashi. Rav Acha asked a question to Rav Ashi. It says in the Mishnah, in another brisa, if it's type of handicap that she probably got it in her father's house, then even after she got married, so normally after she gets married, it's the onus is on the husband to prove when she got the handicap. But if we can determine that she must have had this handicap prior to the wedding day, then we say shal av lahavi raya. It's on the father to prove it. So the Gemara asks, according to Rav Ashi, V'amai, why does basically she have to prove it or a father have to prove it? She has a cheskas haguf that really gives her favor that the handicap must have happened much later after the engagement. And it's her cheskas haguf, and that should overpower his cheskas hamamen. Mana li biyadchahu. She's saying the money that you owe me is in your hand, and I have a cheskas haguf. I shouldn't be the one proving it. You should be the one proving it because I have a cheskas haguf on my side. So why does the brisa say no? It's she has to prove it, or the father, or she has to prove it, because that, and says the Gemara, that particular part of the brisa is talking about something else, where there is no cheskas haguf. It's a type of blemish that has no cheskas haguf. It must have happened when she was born. She had an extra, let's say, an extra toe. If she has an extra toe, that doesn't come later in life. That's something you're born with. So then she doesn't have a cheskas haguf anymore. So the Gemara asks, then wait a second, what is she trying to prove? How could she prove that the husband owes her ksuba money? Yateres my raya maisi. What's she supposed to say? What kind of proof is she saying that the husband owes her ksuba money? She has a real handicap of having a sixth toe. And says the Gemara, raya durav and ipaisu. She has to prove that he saw that she has an extra toe, v'nipaisu, and she came to terms with that. That's why in that case, even after she got married, if it's the type of blemish that she must have had when she was born with, then the onus is on her or her father to prove that he was okay with that. But generally, after you get married and she discovers a handicap, then the onus is on the husband, because the cheskas haguf would overtrump the cheskas mammon. New Gemara. Amar Rav Yehuda Mishmiel. Hamachlif para ebachamar umashach balapar balachamar esapara. A guy makes a deal with a guy has a cow, and one guy has a donkey. So, and they looked at it and checked it out, and everything checks out. So, in the meantime, the balachamar, the owner of the donkey, made a beshicha. He drew the para because he's bartering his donkey for his cow. So he drew, or made a kinyan on. He purchased basically the para, the cow. He showed that the cow is his by pulling the reins of the cow. Okay, so automatically when he does a beshicha, on the cow, the owner of the cow now owns the donkey. So now when he goes, the owner of the cow wants to discover the donkey and bring the donkey to his house. Well, the balapar did not get a chance to pull the donkey, and he discovered the chamar is dead. Now, we have a question over here. When does the donkey die? If the donkey died after the owner of the donkey made the exchange already and had the cow in his possession, then it's too bad on the Baal HaPara. It's too bad on the Baal HaPara. Your donkey died. You formerly owned the cow, but now your donkey died. But the cow's guy could claim, no, when you were pulling my cow, the donkey was already dead. So your kinyan was not even a good kinyan over here, and therefore give me back my chamar, give me back my cow. Okay, so again, we have a guy who has a cow, and he's making an exchange with a chamar. So the owner of the chamar already pulled the cow. When the owner of the cow wants to get the donkey, finds that it's dead. So the guy who is the owner of the cow says, I have a dead donkey over here. Must have been always a dead donkey, so give me back my cow. And the owner of the chamar says, the chamar was alive when I pulled your cow. So the cow, I keep the cow. When did the donkey die? The donkey died after I took a possession of your cow, and therefore it's your donkey that died, not my donkey. It's your donkey because you bought it. So who has to prove when the donkey died? So al bal hachamor lahavi raya shachamor kayam b'shas mashichas para. Really, who has the problem? The real guy has the problem is the owner of the cow, because he has nothing, and the owner of the chamor has the cow in his possession. And so we say, no, the owner of the cow, the owner of the donkey has to prove he can't keep the cow. He has to prove that his donkey was alive when he made a kinyan, a mashicha on the para. That's what he said. So really, the weaker guy is the cow who wanted the donkey, because he has nothing now. And the stronger guy is the owner of the donkey. He has the cow in his possession. So who you would think, who has the proof? The proof, it belongs on the Baal HaChamor. The proof is the Baal HaChamor. If you want to keep that cow, you have to prove that your donkey was alive when you did Mashicha on his cow. And that's what Shmuel came up with this novel halacha. V'tana tuna kala. And we have a source from our Mishnah from the kala, the guy marrying a girl, and he discovering that she has handicap. You can find a source for that. So the Gemara says, hey, kala. Which source do you see that in our Mishnah? What case? Ilema, Shmuel is basically lifting this same idea off the Mishnah. Ilema, would you say? We go to Ayvava Mebeis, Kala Mebeis Avia, that we're talking about the Kala in her father's house. That means we said that the onus is on the father when he discovers that she had a blemish in the father's house. The onus is on the father to prove that this blemish was happened after the engagement. Because why? He's trying to extract money. He's trying to extract money from the husband. He wants him to pay for ksuba. So similarly over here, this chamar who's now holding on to the para, he wants to keep the para. So if you want to keep something, basically extracting the para from the Baal HaPara, from the owner of the cow, you have to prove it. So the Gemara says, midami, how could you say that's the source of Shmuel's halacha? Hasam, over there, maise'av ra'aya umapik. The reason why we put the onus on the father to prove his point is because he's trying to extract money. He's trying to extract something from where? From the husband. So if you're pulling money out of the husband, you have to prove your point. You have to make sure, you have to prove when this blemish happened. But in this case, the owner of the chamar is already holding on to the para. I mean, he already made a mashicha on the para. So therefore, he made a kinyan on the para. So why should you say that's the exact source of Shmuel's idea? Here, it's maisi bala chamar raya umoikim. It's even worse. The owner of the chamar has to prove, and once he proves it, he can keep the para. The para is already in his possession already, and he has to prove something to keep something in his possession. So that's not the source of Shmuel's case. Amar Rabba said, Kala b'beis chamia. Then the sefer of the Mishnah, our sefer of the Mishnah, where it says, if the blemishes were discovered after they were married, then who has to prove his point? The husband. In other words, the husband, if he wants to not pay the ksuba, he wants to keep the money in his bank account. So the onus is on him to prove that he could keep his money in the bank account. Same thing with the Baal HaChamar. The owner of the donkey wants to keep the para. He wants to keep the cow. So therefore, if he wants to keep the cow, the onus is on the owner of the donkey. If you want to keep that cow, you have to prove your point that your donkey was still alive when you made the mashicha on the cow. So the Gemara says, so that's the source. Shmuel lifted his idea from our Mishnah. So the Gemara says, "Vakati loydame." It's not the same. Why? Hasam in the Mishnah, Baal Maisi Raya Umayra Lechaske Da'ah. The reason why the husband over there has to prove his point, because the father has a cheskas haguf. The cheskas haguf always says that her daughter's handicap came much later in life, after they became engaged. And therefore, to undo that cheskas haguf, that's why in order for the husband to keep the money in his pocket, he has to prove his point in order to counter counteract the chazaka of the father. But in this case, Bala Chamor Maisiraya Umoikin Chaske Bidei. The Cheskas Haguf is on the donkey side. Why is the Cheskas Haguf on the donkey owner? Because the donkey was alive at one time. And we always say that if something is alive, it continues to stay alive. It must have died as late as possible. So if you just look at the Cheskas Haguf, it seems to support the Bal HaChamor. So why should we say, in addition to the Cheskas Haguf that supports the Bal HaChamor, the Bal HaChamor has to bring Eidim and prove that it was still alive? Why isn't the Chazaka enough? So that cannot be the source. The end of the Mishnah cannot be the source of Shmuel's din. It seems to be even more stricter than Shmuel. Omar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak said, Kala bebeis avia v'lekudusha. It's talking about the Reisha of the Mishnah is a proof of the Mishnah, is a proof of Shmuel, is the source of Shmuel. The Reisha of the Mishnah actually is not talking about, again, the discovery was that the blemish was in the father's house, and the father has to prove it. Now, it's not because the father's proving it because he wants the Baal to pay ksuba money. Let's assume that the Baal didn't write a ksuba. They were just engaged, so he didn't write a ksuba. He was waiting for the wedding. The reason why the father has to prove it because he wants to keep the actual ring that was given to his daughter. He wants to keep that ring. So he's like the Baal HaChamor trying to keep the cow. So therefore, just like we say in our Mishnah, the father has to prove it in order for him to keep the wedding ring, the Kedushin ring, right, not to return it. So also the Baal HaChamor has, if he wants to keep the cow, the onus is on the owner of the donkey to prove in order for him to keep the cow. And that's the source of the Mishnah to Shmuel, the Reisha of the Mishnah. The loy tema aliba demand yama kedusha lav the tiburin. It's not just there's a machlokes. Let's say any engagement that the husband backs out of it. There's an opinion that you have to, if the husband backs out of it and writes a get, you have to return the ring. So even it's not just that opinion that holds that every kedushin ring lav the tiburin it's not given for keeps. You have to. Or lost. You have to return it if the marriage falls through. The guy has to, the father or the girl has to return back the ring. Though even if you learn that every kedushin is the ring gets kept by the owner, gets kept by the girl or the father. Yes, hanin mili, that's only said kedushin vadai. If you have a regular kedushin, a kedushin vadai that went through. It was a short kedushin. Nobody fooled each other, and therefore, and just somehow the husband backed out of it and wrote a get. So let's say, then the girl doesn't have to return the ring. She could keep the ring. But here, kedushin ta'us, it's a mistake. The whole thing was a mistake. The kedushin was not supposed to be kedushin if she had this handicap prior to the engagement. So we say, if the father brings a proof in, he could keep the kedushin ring. Because the onus is on him if he wants to keep a kedushin ring. Eloi, if he doesn't have the proof, then he can't keep the ring. So let's get back to the Baal HaChamor. We have a guy, a Baal HaChamor, who made a meshicha on a para, and now he's supposed to give back. He's supposed to give back the chamor to the owner of the cow, and the guy with the cow discovers that the donkey is dead. We don't know when the donkey died. Did he die after the Baal HaChamor made his kinyan on the para, and therefore too bad on the owner of the cow, or the former owner of the cow, or did it die later? Did it die prior to that, and there was no barter over here? Who has to prove his point? The owner of the donkey. If he wants to keep that cow, he has to prove that his donkey was still alive when he made the kinyan on the cow. So the Gemara says, one last question. Meisvei. If you find a needle in a let's say in the animal, right? It's in the thickness of the walls of the stomach. If the needle didn't puncture through and through, it just punctured a little bit from one side, share the animal's kosher. If it was a puncture through and through, and the needle came out on the other side of the stomach, treifa, the animal's not kosher. Nimsor leo karadam. If you find that there was blood on the needle, you know that this needle was in the animal's stomach before the slaughtering, and the animal was treif. Like nimsor leo karadam. Let's say you didn't find any blood on the needle, then you know that the needle came in after the shchita, and it's a kosher shchita. You shechted a kosher animal, then the needle slipped in there, and after the shchita, and looks like it was a treifa animal, but wasn't the treifa animal. Now, let's say you know for a fact it was treifa. You see huglat piyamaka. You see that there's a scab over the wound. Then you know 3 days before the shchita they had this wound over here, and therefore, if the guy bought an animal and discovered after shechting it that there's a scab wound inside the stomach, so he bought a lemon. Basically, he bought a treifa animal. So the owner of the animal has to give the butcher back his money. Loy huglan apiyamaka. Let's say you don't have a scab over here, so you can't determine whether the butcher, when he bought the animal from the cattle rancher, did he buy a treifa animal, and therefore the cattle rancher has to pay back the money, or do we say that no, he bought the animal, and under the butcher's domain, this animal became treif? So the Gemara says that he has to prove it. That the butcher has to prove it, because if he wants his money back, he has to prove it. So the Gemara says, wait a second, if the butcher already gave his money, he has to prove now to get his money back. Then why should the butcher have to prove his point according to Shmuel? If the owner of the animal wants to keep the money, he has to prove it. Just like you told me that the Baal Chamor, if he wants to keep the Chamor, if he wants to keep the Para, he has to prove it. So if the Baal Behema wants to keep the money, he should prove it. Answers the Gemara, that Brisa is talking about. That Brisa is talking about where the butcher did not give over money. So therefore, what's the problem? It's now, if the butcher didn't give over the money, the owner of the animal is trying to extract money from the butcher. It's the owner of the animal, the cattle rancher, is proving it. He has to prove it, and he wants to extract money from the butcher. And therefore, because he should have the upper hand, because it's the butcher that has the trouble over here. So we say that nevertheless, it's the owner of the animal. He has to prove that he sold a kosher animal to this man. So the Gemara says, "My paskin, why stop there? If it's always the owner of the cattle rancher having to prove if the onus is on the cattle rancher, it doesn't matter if the butcher gave money or not. Why does the Brisa say only if the cattle rancher, only if the butcher did not give money, then we say the Bala Behema has to prove. Even if the butcher did not give money, it's the owner of the animal, the one where the suffix didn't begin. It's the one who seems to have the upper hand. He should be the one proving it. Ella, so this is the bottom line. We turn it all around and we end the daf. Ella ki also Rami Bar Cheskel. Rami Bar Cheskel came. He was also a Talmud of Shmuel. He said, "Loi kitzatini klala decha Yehuda ach mishmei Shmuel." Don't listen to my brother quoting Shmuel. Hachi Omer Shmuel. This is what Shmuel said. Kol shenoilet safek v'shusai olav araya. Whoever has the problem, whoever seems to have the doubt in his hand, he's the one that proves it. So in the case of the Bala Chamor with the Balapara, he has the doubt. He found the Chamor dead. He has to prove the point. Same thing over here. It's the butcher that has to prove the point, because since the butcher is the one that's holding the bag with the doubt what happened here, he has to prove the onus is on him. The Tana Nikala, and that's a proof from our Mishnah. So the Gemara asks, if we're talking about a case, from this Bryce, it seems that the owner of the animal has to bring the proof and pull out the money.
Yes, I'm trying to hold my mask, my phone, and listen all at the same time. And where's the receipt?
The Pascha. Well, the bottom line over here is that the Gemara says that the onus is on the butcher. If he wants his money back, he has to prove his point.
Prove it.
And even if he did not, because Hamaitzi Mechaver Olavaraya, and if he wants his money back, he has to prove that he was sold a treifa animal. And even if he does not give the money, since the suffix is now in the butcher's hand, the butcher's holding this animal with the suffix in, he has to prove the point. And but the Bryce is talking about a case where he actually gave the money, because most of the time a person doesn't buy cattle without paying first. That's why the Bryce looked at it that way. So Huadin, Shmuel will hold that Hamachlif Para B'Chamar, and the Baal HaChamor already has the Para in his possession. The onus is on the Baal HaPara. He now, if he wants to get his Para back, he has to prove that the Chamor was dead when the other guy made the Mashicha on his Para. So so ends the sugya of basically on onuses, who has to bring the proof to get money back or not. Okay, it becomes easier, Be'ez Hashem, tomorrow. We go back to Kesubos stuff.
Okay. Thank you. Gute Nacht.
Tomorrow.
Gute Nacht. Bye-bye.
Tomorrow. Okay, thank you.